After years of saving, I bought a $750,000 house and invited everyone over. The night came and not one person showed up. While I sat surrounded by empty plates, my dad called and said, "Your brother thinks the house should be his." I, 32M, had been planning this housewarming party for 3 months. The house itself had taken me 8 years to afford. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every declined dinner invitation had been worth it when I finally signed those papers. $750,000 for a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood I'd dreamed about since childhood. The kind of place where kids rode bikes on clean sidewalks and everyone knew their neighbors' names. The caterers had left an hour ago. 47 plates of food sat untouched on my new dining table. I'd ordered enough for 60 people because I wanted to make sure nobody went hungry. My family, my friends, the people who'd supposedly supported me through those brutal years of saving. My phone buzzed at 7:30. I told everyone to arrive at 6. The food was already getting cold. It was Dad calling. I answered while staring at the elaborate cheese board I'd spent $200 on. Dad asked if I was having a good time at the party. His voice had that careful tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news. I told him nobody had shown up yet, thinking maybe there was traffic or some coordinated late arrival I didn't know about. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said my brother thought the house should be his. I actually laughed. It was such an absurd statement that my brain couldn't process it as serious. I asked him to repeat that. Dad explained that my brother had been talking to the family for the past few weeks. Apparently, since my brother had 3 kids and I was single, it made more sense for him to have the house. Dad said my brother felt I was being selfish by not considering the family's needs. That's why nobody came to the party. They were all at my brother's apartment having dinner instead, discussing how to approach me about this. I sat down on my new hardwood floors. They'd been refinished just last week. I'd spent hours researching the best finish, the most durable coating. I asked Dad if he was serious. He sighed and said my brother made some good points. The house had 4 bedrooms, and I only needed 1. My brother's kids were cramped in their 2-bedroom apartment. Wouldn't it be the right thing to do, as family, to help them out? I asked Dad if he remembered the 8 years I'd spent saving for this. The promotions I'd earned. The side jobs I'd worked. The life I'd put on hold. Dad said those were all choices I'd made, and now I had the opportunity to make another choice. One that would benefit the whole family. He suggested I could move into my brother's apartment, which would be more suitable for a single guy anyway. My brother would take over the mortgage payments, of course. Well, most of them. He'd need help for the first few years while he got established. I hung up. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. I'd been sitting in the dark, too stunned to even turn on the lights in my new living room. Part of me hoped it was someone from the party, someone who'd gotten lost or had a legitimate excuse. It was my brother. He had his wife and 3 kids with him. The oldest was 12, the youngest was 5. They stood on my porch like they were already measuring the place. My brother asked if we could talk inside. He had this smile on his face, the same one he'd used when we were kids, and he wanted my toys. I stepped aside and let them in. His kids immediately scattered through the house. I could hear them upstairs, opening doors, claiming bedrooms. My brother's wife headed straight for the kitchen, examining my appliances with an appraising eye. She commented that she'd always wanted a gas range. My brother sat down on my couch and asked if Dad had called me. I confirmed that he had. My brother nodded and said he was glad we could discuss this like adults. He'd brought some paperwork with him, documents his friend who worked in real estate had drawn up. It would make the transfer easier. I asked him if he was out of his mind. He looked genuinely confused. He explained that he wasn't asking me to give him the house for free. He'd take over the mortgage, handle all the payments. I'd be released from that burden. Plus, his kids would finally have space to grow up properly. Wasn't that what family did for each other? I pointed out that I'd spent 8 years saving for the down payment. That the mortgage was in my name because I was the one who qualified for it. That this was my house, my achievement, my life. My brother's expression shifted. He said I was being selfish, just like everyone had said. He reminded me that he'd been there for me when I needed help moving into my last apartment. That family helped family. That just because I made more money didn't mean I should hoard it. I asked him when he'd last helped me with anything. He looked away. His wife came back from the kitchen and announced that she loved the layout. She started talking about where they'd put the kids' beds, how they'd convert the basement into a playroom. She was redecorating my house in real time while standing in my living room. I told them all to leave. My brother stood up slowly. He said I was making a mistake. The family had discussed this, and they all agreed it was the right move. If I refused, I'd be choosing material possessions over family. People would remember that. There would be consequences. I opened the front door and told them to get out. They left, but not before my brother's wife grabbed one of the expensive candles I'd bought for the party. She said she might as well take something since I clearly wasn't going to share. My brother didn't stop her. I spent that night calling every family member who'd skipped the party. My mom said she understood my position but didn't want to get involved. My sister said my brother's kids really did need more space. My uncle suggested I was overreacting. My aunt hung up on me. Every single one of them had known about the ambush. They'd all chosen my brother's side before even hearing mine. The next morning, I went to work exhausted. My boss noticed and asked if everything was okay. I gave him the abbreviated version: bought a house, family wanted it, threw a party nobody attended. He listened carefully. Then he mentioned that his company was opening a new office in Denver. They needed someone to lead the expansion. The salary was 40% higher than what I was making. Housing costs were lower there. Was I interested? I said yes before he'd finished the sentence. The transfer processed in 3 weeks. I'd never moved so fast in my life. I put the house on the market immediately, pricing it competitively. It sold in 6 days to a lovely couple with twin daughters. They loved everything about it: the layout, the neighborhood, the gas range in the kitchen. I didn't tell my family I was selling until the day before closing. I sent a group text with a photo of the sold sign in the front yard and a simple message explaining that I'd accepted a job in Denver. The house sold for $780,000. After closing costs and paying off the mortgage, I walked away with a substantial profit. My brother called within minutes. He was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He demanded to know how I could do this to his family. His kids had been looking forward to moving in. His wife had already started planning the renovations. I'd betrayed them all. I asked him if he had any of that in writing. He went silent. I reminded him that he'd never made an offer, never signed anything, never put down a deposit. The house was mine to sell. I'd sold it. That was the end of the discussion. He threatened to sue me. I told him to get a lawyer and hung up. My mom called next. She was crying. She said I'd torn the family apart over money, that I should have been the bigger person, that my brother's kids were devastated. I asked her why she hadn't come to my housewarming party. She didn't have an answer for that. Dad called last. He was angry in that quiet, disappointed way that used to make me feel small when I was a kid. He said I'd embarrassed the family, that word would get around about what I'd done, that I'd have to live with this decision. I told him I'd already made peace with it. Then I asked him why he thought it was okay for my brother to try to take my house, but not okay for me to sell it. He hung up. Update 1. I moved to Denver 3 months ago. The job is everything they promised: challenging, rewarding, and paying well enough that I'm already looking at property here. Real estate is cheaper, the mountains are beautiful, and nobody knows anything about my family drama. Last week, my brother's wife sent me a Facebook message. She'd clearly spent time crafting it. She apologized for how things went down with the house. She said they'd been under a lot of financial stress, and the opportunity to get a bigger place had made them act irrationally. She hoped we could reconcile for the sake of family. I almost believed her until I got to the end. She mentioned that they were struggling with rent increases and asked if I could send them some money to help out, just until they got back on their feet. A few thousand would make all the difference. I blocked her. My sister called a few days later. She'd apparently been designated as the new mediator. She explained that my brother and his wife were having serious financial troubles. They'd been counting on my house situation working out. Without that, they'd made some decisions that hadn't panned out. They needed help. I asked her if anyone had apologized for skipping my housewarming party. She said that seemed petty to bring up now, given the circumstances. I asked her if anyone had acknowledged that trying to pressure me into giving up my house was wrong. She said my brother had been desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. I asked her if she'd help me if I were desperate. She hesitated too long before answering. I told her I had to go. The thing about cutting ties with toxic family members is that it's both harder and easier than people expect. It's hard because society tells you family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive and forget. It's easy because once you're free from the constant drama and manipulation, you realize how much energy you'd been wasting on people who didn't value you. I started building a life here, made friends at work, joined a hiking group. Started dating someone who thinks it's impressive that I saved for 8 years to buy a house. Not evidence that I should have been sharing my success with people who'd never supported me. Update 2. 6 months in Denver, and I got a LinkedIn message from my brother. He wanted to connect professionally. I ignored it. Then I got an email from his work address. He'd found a job posting at my company and wanted to know if I could refer him. The position was in my department. I forwarded the email to HR with a note explaining our relationship and asking that they not involve me in any hiring decisions regarding him. They assured me they wouldn't. My brother didn't get the job. He blamed me publicly on Facebook, posting a long rant about how I'd sabotaged his career opportunities out of pettiness. Several family members liked and commented in support. My mom shared it. I didn't respond. But several of my former colleagues from my old city reached out privately. Apparently, my brother had been telling people that I'd stolen his inheritance to buy the house, and that's why he tried to claim it. The story had gotten elaborate. Our grandmother had left money for both of us, but I'd forged documents to take it all. Our grandmother was still alive. She was 87 and living in a nursing home I paid for. I called her. She was sharp as ever, if a bit tired. I asked if my brother had visited recently. She said he'd come by twice in the past month, asking about her will and whether she'd be leaving anything to her grandchildren. She'd found it odd since he'd never shown much interest before. I explained what was happening. She listened in silence. Then she asked me for my lawyer's information. She wanted to update her will to make sure my brother couldn't contest it later. 2 weeks later, I received a copy of her updated will. She'd left everything to me, not because she was cutting my brother out as punishment, but because she trusted me to handle her affairs responsibly and distribute anything to family members who actually needed it. The will included a letter explaining her reasoning. She'd watched my brother try to manipulate me for the house. She knew his pattern. She wanted to make sure he couldn't do the same thing with her estate. My brother found out somehow. Maybe Mom told him. Maybe my sister did. He sent me a series of increasingly unhinged messages demanding I refuse the inheritance. That I couldn't keep taking things that should belong to the whole family. That I was destroying our grandmother's legacy. I reminded him that Grandma was still alive and making her own decisions. He said she was being manipulated by me. I blocked him on every platform. Update 3. It's been a year since I moved to Denver. I bought a condo here, smaller than the house back home, but it's mine, and I had a housewarming party where 23 people showed up. Real friends who were happy for my success. My grandmother passed away 3 months ago. I flew back for the funeral. The whole family was there, all of them acting like nothing had ever happened. My brother hugged me and said he was glad we could come together in this difficult time. His wife offered her condolences. My parents looked relieved that we were all being civil. The will reading was the next day. I'd asked the lawyer to keep it simple and direct. He read through the document professionally, no drama in his delivery. Everything went to me, with the exception of a few specific items for other grandchildren. My brother stood up and said this was unacceptable, that Grandma had clearly been confused in her final years, that he'd be contesting the will. His lawyer was already prepared to file. My lawyer pulled out the letter Grandma had written. It was dated just 2 weeks before she died, witnessed by her doctor and 2 nurses. In it, she explicitly stated that she was of sound mind and explained exactly why she'd made her decisions. She'd even anticipated the contest and included provisions that anyone who challenged the will would receive nothing, not even the sentimental items she'd originally allocated to them. My brother's face went through several colors. He started yelling about how I'd poisoned her mind against him, how I'd isolated her, how this whole thing was part of my scheme to cut the family out of everything they deserved. My mom tried to calm him down. My dad told me this wasn't over. My sister just looked disappointed, like I'd somehow failed a test I didn't know I was taking. I left the lawyer's office and went directly to the airport. I had a red-eye back to Denver. I didn't attend the family dinner they'd planned. I didn't respond to the group text asking where I was. I was done. The inheritance wasn't massive. Grandma had been comfortable, but not wealthy. After settling her debts and final expenses, there was enough left to pay off my condo entirely. I used some of it to make donations in her name to causes she'd cared about. The rest went into savings. My brother never filed his contest. His lawyer probably explained how ironclad the will was and how much it would cost to lose. But he tells anyone who'll listen that I stole his inheritance, just like I'd stolen his house. I haven't spoken to any of them in 9 months. Sometimes I miss the idea of having a family. But I don't miss the reality of the one I had. The constant manipulation, the expectation that my success was communal property, the way they'd all turned on me the moment I didn't give them what they wanted. I'm 33 now. I have a life I built myself, friends who celebrate my wins instead of trying to take them, and a career that's thriving. My grandmother's final gift wasn't the money. It was the validation that I'd been right to stand my ground. Some people say you can't choose your family, but I've learned you can choose whether to let them define your life. I chose myself, and I've never looked back.